So hello everyone, and welcome to the weekly Dharma Gathering. My name is Alex Van Gils, and I'm one of the hosts of Weekly Dharma Gathering. Tonight's session will be led by Ashley Dingus and is titled Radiating Confidence. Ashley will lead us in meditation and a Dharma talk, and afterwards there can be an opportunity for some discussion. Tonight's session is being recorded, so if you prefer not to be seen, you can turn off your camera. And please note that you'll also be recorded when asking a question. Also, if you have a question during the guided instruction or the Dharma talk, please feel free to enter it into the chat at any time, and we'll be able to address it during the discussion. The recording of tonight's gathering can be accessed within 48 hours via your purchased products on your Vimeo Weekly Dharma Gathering account, and you'll receive an email notification once it's posted. Ashley Dingus is a meditation teacher and practitioner in the Shambhala Buddhist lineage and a student of Sakyong Mipham Rinpoche and Ani Pema Chödrön. She is based in Brooklyn, New York City, and is an award-winning marketing and communications executive. Ashley currently serves as the Director of Marketing and Sales for G4 Productions, a Tony Award-winning theatrical producer, and is a co-founder of Overture Plus streaming platform. She holds an MBA from the NYU Stern School of Business and co-founded the Weekly Dharma Gathering online platform, where teachers from many lineages explore Dharma in relation to issues of race, gender, identity, and living meaningfully in a challenging world. So I'm so glad that we're all here together, and Ashley, please guide us in meditation.
Thank you, Alex. It is, in full disclosure, it's very rainy here tonight, so I apologize if you hear some strange noises. Brooklyn is very loud and rainy. Thank you so much, Alex, and it's a pleasure to be here tonight. I did indeed co-found Weekly Dharma Gathering with, also along with Alex, which he didn't mention, but he's one of our co-founders, as well as Shantae Smalls, and we have an amazing team of people, and I always feel a little bit not worthy and of teaching myself on the platform, because I don't often teach. We do a lot behind the scenes, but I was looking forward to this opportunity tonight. And so I will talk about confidence. I will talk about confidence in the Buddhist sense of the word, which is maybe a little bit different from what we think about when we talk about confidence in popular culture. And I thought about this topic. I have thought about this topic a lot for a number of reasons, but the reason that it resonated with me and the reason that I wanted to speak about it is because the way that we approach confidence, or the way that we approach unconditional confidence, as it's sometimes called in my tradition, is that it's really a state of being, so that we're trying to cultivate a state of being as opposed to trying to find something to have confidence in. And I think that anytime that we can think about ways of being in the world, we're thinking about our approach to the way that we live, approach to the way that we interact with people and deal with discomfort, with joy, with all of the various emotions that we hold in our very complex experience. And it gives us something to work with. It gives us something tangible to work with, especially in times of difficulty. It's been a tremendously challenging few weeks in the United States, in the middle of an already beyond challenging several years. And I don't think I have to explain that too much more, but I think that I certainly have been affected by the events of the last few weeks, the violence. And while the meditation practice that I'm going to lead tonight is not a formal Tonglen practice, I do want to just encourage you to work with the practice on your own, and also maybe open it up. Consider somebody in your life who maybe needs love or support. Consider your community. I know many people who participate in our our gatherings and with us as Sangha are also living in these communities that have been affected by violence, or belong to populations that are experiencing racial violence. So it won't be a formal Tonglen practice in that sense, but I would invite you to kind of bring that experience into your meditation practice as well. And I will say too that we have been trying to offer spaces to gather in response to all of these events. So last week we did a Tonglen gathering that Alex led, and that recording is available on our website. And then we'll also be doing a free Tonglen on Friday evening with Shantae Smalls, who's one of our other co-founders, in response to this week's violence. So if you are looking for support specifically in that way too, I encourage you. We have a lot of resources, and we try to offer spaces for contemplative practice within this. So we'll do a longer practice to start. We'll probably practice for 20 or so minutes. And I would just encourage you to please be comfortable when you're practicing. So if you want to turn your camera off, if you want to face away from your screen, if you don't want to sit on a cushion, if you want to sit on your couch, just please do whatever you need to be comfortable. And that is the most important thing. And just take care of yourself, and however it is that you know that you need to do that. So please, at any point, feel free to make adjustments and be comfortable. So I will start. I'm assuming a lot of us have our own practices, but I will guide us through basically a simple shamatha practice, which is basically a mindfulness of breath practice. And this is very common in my tradition. And in this practice, we're just going to use the body breathing as the point of focus. It's very simple. We'll be focusing on the full cycle of the breath and basically using that as the anchor for our practice, anchor for our awareness, noticing if we drift away, coming back to the body breathing. And that's basically it. So I'll guide us through it. It is an eyes open practice. That's how I teach and practice in my tradition. And I invite you to try it. If you don't like it, if that's not how you practice, you can close your eyes. But that's how I'll be guiding us. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and lead us. So first things first, as I already mentioned, just comfort in your body is the most important thing to emphasize here. So again, it doesn't matter what you're sitting on as long as you feel well supported. I'm sitting on a cushion, so if I'm doing that, I want to make sure that my weight is right in the center of the cushion. If you're in a chair, just really planting your weight right into the center of the chair. Noticing if you're feeling unsupported in the chair, you can add a pillow behind yourself. And if you're sitting on the floor, you just want to have your hips above your knees and legs loosely crossed. Again, very relaxed. You can let your arms just rest on the tops of your thighs. I always just pick mine up and let them drop naturally. So I really cannot emphasize this enough. The focus on a relaxed posture. So an upright but relaxed posture, being kind to your body. We do not have to force posture or feel like we need to be sitting upright in a certain way, but you should feel like your body posture supports your practice and you can be comfortable in the seat that you're sitting in. So with the arms resting on the tops of the thighs, your spine is just rising up from the pelvis, should feel uplifted, again, not arched back, not kind of crunching backwards to try to compensate for your posture. So you might feel like you want to straighten up, but I just really recommend that you kind of allow the spine to straighten your back up without really doing much to your shoulders. Head's balancing at the top of the spine. I hold a lot of tension in my facial muscles. So something that I like to do is start by looking straight ahead and just dropping the chin slightly about a half an inch. You can almost feel like you're pushing the chin back slightly, and you'll feel the back of the neck release, and that's what you're going for. So really eliminating these spots where there's tension in the back of the neck, in the skull, face. And then from here, you can let the gaze fall downward. So it should land around 3 or 4 feet in front of you on the floor. Very loose gaze, very, very relaxed gaze. So the most important thing with eyes open practice is to try to keep the eyes as relaxed as possible. Having a good sense of your peripheral vision, that also helps to soften the gaze, and relaxing your facial muscles. So if you feel any tension in your jaw, around the eyes, you can just let that come out, let it go out with an out breath. You can even let your jaw hang open slightly, and you can close your lips and touch the tongue to the roof of the mouth, and that will also help to kind of release your jaw. And then before we leap into practice, just doing a really light body scan here. Once again, noticing if there's any spots in your body that feel tense or tight. We're kind of on the brink before we go into our practice, but you could use a few in breaths and out breaths to just imagine breathing out any tension or muscular tightness. And just imagine it dissolving out with an out breath. So when we do this, we're begin to bring our attention to the feeling of the body. It's almost a little bit like before we move into focusing on the breath, we're just getting comfortable with the body, noticing our body, feeling what it feels like today in this current state and environment. Having a little bit of sense of the environment around us as well, maybe the temperature of the room. Just really starting to try to bring our awareness into what we're doing, into the posture. Sometimes at this point too, if I'm feeling especially speedy or like I've had a very busy day, or I'm in my head, like really kind of in my top of my head, I imagine just dropping my awareness down into my heart center. So just shifting some focus or attention onto the heart center of the chest. This can sometimes help to make us feel like we're dropping down into the body. Maybe use 1 or 2 more breath cycles to just allow that body scan to dissolve out. And just let it fade away. And then you can begin to bring your attention or your awareness to the feeling of the body breathing. So in this particular practice now, we're noticing the full cycle of breath. And you can place your attention really anywhere in that full cycle of breath that you're noticing, particularly today. So it could be air coming in and out of the nose and mouth. It could be in your chest with your lungs expanding and contracting. It could be diaphragm or air moving out of your nose and mouth. Doesn't really matter exactly where you place your focus. You can just let it rest where it's natural. Really feeling that whole cycle of breath. At this point, too, I'd like to offer you a choice, which is if you would like to invite a person, a community into your practice. Again, won't be a formal Tonglen practice or loving kindness practice, but you can just simply hold them in your heart center, or you can choose to just focus on the breath. So we're focusing on the breathing, but again, we have this awareness, very light awareness of the space around us. So we're not separate from the space, we're in the space. Sometimes when we do this practice with some emphasis on the space around us, it can also help to imagine a little bit of a slightly lengthened exhale so that you're dissolving out into the space around you, expanding with an out breath. And then we'll continue doing this in silence together. So I will ring the Rin to start and close this period of silence. And you can just keep working with this practice. Again, having some sense of the breath cycle, sense of dissolving out, a little bit of expansion with the out breath, the feeling of the space around you. You can work with any of these different aspects. It's really up to you. You can just pick one, and then we'll keep doing this together for a few more moments in silence. As you start to move out of your practice, you can bring a little movement back into the body. You can wiggle fingers and toes, maybe stretch a little bit. Roll out any tension that you feel on neck and shoulders, your torso. So I'm going to give a talk, but I say that very loosely because if you have questions or thoughts at any point, please, you can raise your hand, you can put them in the chat, and I would love to hear from everyone. So it's more of a discussion, and we'll have some discussion time at the end as well. So for those who missed my opening spiel, I picked this topic because I was thinking about what could be helpful now, what is helpful. And I personally have felt the difficulties of the world kind of increasing. I noticed a lot of that around the 1 year anniversary of the COVID pandemic. And I like this topic a lot because we're really, again, talking about cultivating a way of being versus trying to kind of dive intellectually into something. It's more of a heart topic for me. And it's also a personal topic for me because I am a Buddhist practitioner. And if you're also a Buddhist, you might know that you get lots of names throughout your career in Buddhism. And lots of people relate to that differently. And one of mine has the word confidence in it. And I've always thought that I wanted to explore what those words mean in terms of my way of being personally and how I manifest in the world. And in preparation for this, I also read an article written by the Dalai Lama about how confidence is something that is not helpful, but necessary if we really want to aspire to help other people. So I'll start by kind of defining confidence and framing it in relationship to Buddhist teachings in my lineage. And then I'll talk a little bit about how that manifests in the way that we can be with others. So first, I want to really define what I mean by confidence, because again, it's really the state of being or a way of being versus something that we have or we get or something that we're looking to get. So in this way, that might feel like confidence in our intellect or confidence in a skill that we have or talent that we have or our financial stability or something that we're looking to externally. But what we are talking about in this way, in terms of Dharma, is unconditional confidence. So that is confidence that is without condition, without dependency on external sources or people or environments. We're not having to get that from somewhere. It's also called enlightened confidence, although I like the term unconditional confidence a little bit better because it feels more absolute to me somehow. And the state that we're talking about when we talk about unconditional confidence is really a state of, more than anything, a state of relaxation, but it's a relaxed and energized state. So sometimes it's also compared to a state of mindfulness awareness, which is cultivated through practice. I also like to look at words somehow and how they're defined in different languages. So in Tibetan, this word is called zigi, Z-I-G-I. And the first part of the word Z means shine, brilliance, can even mean glitter, which I think is great. And G means splendor or dignity. So you can see that confidence in that way, the way that we speak about confidence is like, I have confidence in XYZ. But this way of talking about it is really about it really radiating has this quality of being built into the word itself. Sorry, I have a little bit of eye makeup running into my eye. I apologize. So I'm just gonna wipe it a little. I'm not crying, although I do love the word and I think it's very beautiful and it does touch me emotionally. It's also the name of Alex's parents' new puppy, which I think is just great, ZG. So it basically means brilliant dignity or radiant splendor. And that's very different from the way that we use the word confidence in our vernacular. It can also mean elegance. So when I think of people who embody confidence, to me, I think of them as elegant or even regal in a way. So I like thinking about the word that way. So what is it a state of? What is confidence a state of? If it's not something that we're trying to get, if it's not something that we're trying to obtain, and it's a state of relaxation, which is great, but what does that all mean? What we want to look to is kind of the foundations of our teaching. So there's really three things that I want to touch on when we think about this and as I'm defining these terms. The first is the idea that we are all basically inherently wakeful. This is a really important part of my tradition. Sometimes if you take a Shambhala program, you'll hear it called basic goodness. There's many ways that you can define this. Sometimes I don't even like to call it basic goodness because it sort of has this inherent duality in it, good versus bad. But it really means that we're inherently wakeful. It means that we're starting out from a place of being basically okay. We're not basically bad. We're not flawed people. And we don't have to fix ourselves. Although another thing that we do is sometimes we cover this up, or we are culturally led to believe that there's something wrong with us because we live in a culture that profits off of us believing that we have to fix ourselves or get something or get better. So it's radical in that sense. It's radical in the sense of thinking that, all right, I'm actually fundamentally good. I'm starting out from a place of basic sanity. There are causes and conditions in my life that cause me to doubt that cause me to act differently or believe differently. But I don't have to buy into that. I could operate from this place of being fundamental, feeling like I have the ability to be fundamentally awake. So that's one place that we start. So we have confidence in that. We know other things to be true. We know that suffering exists. It's real, it exists, we perpetuate it. We also know that everything is impermanent. And these are, I could talk for hours on any of these topics individually, but this acknowledgement that that's kind of the framework from where we're starting is where unconditionality begins. So that's where we start to take this bigger or balcony view. So that's why you see a lot of contemplations on death and dying in Buddhist practice. We're reminding ourselves that impermanence is real. On a smaller scale, it also, we're also talking about impermanence of the things that happen to us, the external things that happen to us in our lives are also impermanent, even though a lot of times they feel extremely real and long, and like you go through these long phases of our lives of feeling a certain way or another. And it doesn't mean that we don't experience emotions, that we don't experience pleasure, we don't experience difficulty. It just means that we are making an active decision not to get hooked by it. So one of my teachers is Ani Pema Chodron, and she often uses a quote that is from, I believe is from Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. And she says, pain is not a punishment and pleasure is not a reward. So we're starting at the ground of basic goodness. We're seeing what's happening to us as it is. We're seeing suffering. We're seeing the emotions that we experience. We're not pushing them away. We're inviting them in without going into a rabbit hole, going into the storyline. But we're not basing our worth off of these factors that are happening to us externally. The unconditional confidence is this idea that we're able to see everything clearly and not necessarily buy into it. Sometimes also a word that I think is helpful in this context too is equanimity. So we stabilize our mind through meditation practice, but we're not necessarily, again, pushing away our feelings. We're also not inviting emotions to kind of get in and take root. And we're constantly working with this balance, and we're working with practicing equanimity. So it's a lot of it's another way to talk about it. A phrase that sometimes we use as well to describe this is sad joy. So we can have and hold both sadness and joy at the same time. We can appreciate life being bittersweet and also being joyful and being sad. Sometimes this is also described as the way we have relationships with people that we love. It's often not one emotion. It almost never is just one emotion, and certainly not for a long time relationship or love for someone. It's complex and it's multiple emotions, and it's beautiful. But it's also real, and it's a real acknowledgement of our lives as human beings. And that's also why practices involving contemplating death can help with this too, because we're looking at the whole picture. We're looking at the totality of our experience. And birth and death exist together. I took a grief workshop. It's a whole community of practice that I'm just learning about, which is grief work. And um, they used a lot of this same terminology to describe how people talk about life with children. And I thought it was so meaningful to me, and it really really touched my heart. And I realized too, somehow children sometimes experience what I'm talking about now as well, without even having to kind of be told. And this kind of clear seeing, this relaxed way of being, is really what we're talking about when we talk about confidence. So it's like almost like if somebody says to you, I'm confident, you don't believe them. You'd be like, well, what does that mean? You can't talk about it. It's really a way of being. And when you meet someone who's confident, you feel it, or who's confident, you feel it viscerally. It's an experience of that person and kind of their way of being in the world. And that's how we start to walk the bodhisattva path. So that's how we start to actually extend out and help others. And I think that self-confidence is an important thing. So I don't mean to kind of frame it in this way of like, it's not what we're talking about. But I actually think that it just naturally happens out of this different way of looking at this state of awakened unconditionality. So I think it's a natural byproduct. I don't think that it's something, it's almost like it just can happen when we create the ground for it. Because when we acknowledge all of these things are real, suffering, impermanence, changes in our life, changes in our emotions, different emotional experiences, that's the point from which we can help other people and be of benefit. Sometimes also called a humble and vast vision, which I appreciate. I also want to say that I think this is a really hard thing to do right now. Specifically, the world is extremely difficult. It is hard not to get swayed by things. There's a lot to feel. There are a lot of emotions to experience. It's very hard not to get triggered by things that we see and hear in the media, the way people treat each other. And so that's part of the reason that I wanted to talk about it tonight, because it's really active for me. And I really think about, how to, it's almost like creating a container for ourselves. So creating a container of kindness and gentleness to allow ourselves to experience our emotions and our feelings and thoughts and let them be there. And that's, again, the relaxation that I'm talking about too. We're relaxing into it, just allowing ourselves to have whatever experience that we're having. And it doesn't have to define us. So I don't love to just ramble on. I would love to hear thoughts from others if you have an experience to share, or if you totally disagree, or I'd love to hear how people experience confidence. Do you experience it this way? Is this something that is easy for you or difficult? I would just invite you to you can just start talking or put anything in the chat if you'd like to share.
I have a question. Hi.
Hi.
So I agree with everything you said, and I'm really connected. I really resonate. One thing that I have I'm still confused, and I'm still trying to figure out is how action looks like from an unconditional confidence source, or so how do we act, so how that action looks like from this unconditional confidence? That is the things that I'm still struggling with.
It's a really good question. I think that to put it in another context too, equanimity is one way of saying it, but also it might manifest for you as just discernment. And what that might look like is figuring out what action is needed. Is action needed? A lot of times we think that action's needed, but what's actually needed is space. So I think that when we approach something from this point of view, which again, I feel like is a little bit radical in terms of the way that society wants us to act, is that we kind of get conditioned into thinking that there always has to be action. And I think one thing that's come through, at least for me, through my own meditation practice and mindfulness awareness practice, is being able to recognize when space is the kindest thing to offer into a situation as well too. So it could mean action. It could mean nothing, could mean doing nothing. It could mean a lot of things, but I think it's pre-action, if that makes sense. So we're talking about is, again, like it's like skillful means, which may or may not result in an action. Also, when action is needed, I think that every time that we can take this bigger picture view of our lives, and thinking of life as precious and short and impermanent, it allows us to, I always look this is personal. This is the way I do it. I don't know if this is the right answer or not, but I always look toward the end goal of something. If someone is really struggling and having a hard time, sometimes we don't even know necessarily, sometimes the thing that's causing our difficulty is not what we think it is. It's not the external source that we think it is. So I always try to look farther down the path and say, what's actually needed here to like get to this end goal? And maybe that is kind cutting action. Maybe again, it's space. Maybe it's just a lot of love and care and showing up for someone and just offering your own care. But I always try to take like that balcony view and say, you know, what is there's always going to be a next step that's needed. There's always going to be some final step that's needed. So what is that? And looking at the whole thing as a bigger picture, I think sometimes really can help with that. And this is another cultural thing too, because we're conditioned to like have to respond to, it's like social media. It's like somebody posts something, you got to fire back. Somebody sends you an email, you got to fire back on it. And this has all helped me just slow it down. Just put a beat in between things. Step back, look at it from a bigger picture. What is actually needed? What is kind? What kind of benefits as many beings in this situation as possible? And then I go from there.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's a really good question. I got a question in the chat. If I could describe the translation of ZG one more time, so I will do that. So ZG is more or less the Tibetan word for confidence. Often if you study Tibetan, the thing that's really cool about Tibetan is that words mean different things. So like a lot of words have double meanings. One example of that is the word mind and heart are also interchangeable, which to me is so interesting because in English, it's so not. Your mind is your mind, your heart is your heart. They're like up here, down here. I even expressed it that way in the meditation instructions, like if you're up here, drop down here. But in Tibetan, they're almost interchangeable, really. So it's heart mind way of being. So sometimes I like to go back and look at the Tibetan meanings of words when I'm teaching or talking about things. So in this case, ZG, Z-I-G-I, J-I, sorry, Z-I-J-I. So it means Z means shine or glitter, can also mean radiance, and G means splendor or dignity. So it's kind of already saying radiating confidence, like it has this quality of radiating out. Shine and glitter sort of affects the whole space around it. And it's really different from confidence, I think, in like the English way of saying or thinking about confidence. And then to me, that sort of radiant splendor, dignity feels like the word elegance or kind of regalness, which I think is the way that people carry themselves when they're really manifesting confidence. It's like this natural, relaxed elegance, and you feel it. It's totally a visceral and tangible thing that you feel when you're around people who really manifest that. And dogs that are named ZG too, you know.
I'm trying to share a picture of the dog, but our Zoom security settings are such that
It's a very sweet dog name. I'm happy if you want to hear more about it too, I'm happy to talk more about it, but that just to go back to kind of the definition of the word, and again, it's this sort of difference between Tibetan and English words. I think it's always helpful to kind of, I mean, you could do this in other languages too. You can break words down. It's like translating poetry into another language. It doesn't quite translate exactly right. There's some feeling that's sometimes lost in translation. So going back and looking at that can be really interesting too. I guess one other thing that I'd like to say that I didn't directly connect back to meditation practice. I know I spoke a little bit about mindfulness awareness, which um, when we practice meditation, we have mindfulness, which is um, usually in my tradition, mindfulness of breath. So we're placing our attention, our mind on something, in this case, the breath. Then we have our awareness, which notices when we're no longer on the breath, paying attention to the breath. And it says, hey, you're not on the breath anymore, you daydream. And it's this constant kind of constant active cycle of placing our attention on the breath and breathing, or whatever our focus of mindfulness practice is. It could be mantra or visualization, and coming back to it when our awareness tells us that we've wandered. So when I say that, I also, just to break that down a little bit more, so that state of mindfulness awareness, I also mean just really anytime you're practicing, you have an opportunity to practice with this, because you pretty much have unlimited opportunities to become distracted or to choose to follow an emotion or a storyline or a daydream. And most of the time, we're actively working with bringing the mind back from that. And that's not really dissimilar to what I'm talking about in terms of cultivating unconditional confidence. So it really connects directly to meditation practice on a like a more micro level, because it's very focused. We're focused on keeping our attention somewhere. Um, but it has the same kind of the same flavor of what I'm talking about when I speak about this way that we view the world. And that's how meditation practice fits into this as well, because we're training the mind to stabilize. We're stabilizing the mind through meditation practice. And we can use that in the way that we move through the world too. We can use that discernment and that discipline of meditation practice to approach how we take action or not, or what we bring into situations. And it's really not different in a way. It just has maybe different fruitional aspects.
Shall we close for the night, or do you want to ask another question? Or
I just wanted to kind of leave it open. I'm curious if anyone would share how they experience confidence in this way, or maybe not. Um, I think for me, active, it's a really active practice, and it's really, um, I like I said, I think it's hard to not be swayed by external circumstances. So I wouldn't, just invite you to think about this, and if you if you'd like to share, you can still. We still have a few more minutes left, but also that's really what I wanted to say, and wanted to kind of draw back that connection between our mindfulness awareness practice to this idea of unconditional or enlightened confidence.
I can share. I feel that for me was when I started to meditate in Shambhala tradition, I definitely realized the importance of having that confidence as a ground. And then from that ground, there is lots of thing to unfold. It's a never end unfolding in many different levels that comes up in a meditation practice, but comes up also in a kind of psychological work. And so I found that what is really important is the journey is on the cushion, but is also fundamentally is having a ground of confidence, allow the journey of self-discovery and opening up and see what is there possible. That's what is my experience. So in that sense, it's very, very powerful, and I'm very grateful to have this in my life.
It's really very well put. Thank you for sharing that. I really like the idea, the word unfolding that you said too, because I think that it's all very, these are all very like active ideas. These are like active things that we're trying to cultivate. And that for me, like wasn't why I started meditation practice necessarily, but it also has been a kind of beautiful byproduct. And I ended up doing a lot of self-reflect. You kind of can't help but do it when you are engaging in practice like this, and sort of choiceless. So it happens naturally. Like as you said, it unfolds naturally. And I think that that is really powerful, and certainly not what I thought I was getting myself into when I started meditating. Thank you for sharing that. It was really beautiful. So unless anyone else wants to share, I think that's actually a wonderful place to end. And thank you all for being here, for showing up tonight. I always feel honored to teach on the platform, because I normally am and behind the scenes on the platform, but it's been wonderful to be with you. And I'm actually hosting next week's talk, which I'm very excited about, with Christina Lopez, who is a death doula and Tibetan Buddhist practitioner on liberating death. I just stole Alex's thunder a little bit, but if you can join us for that talk, I will be very pleased to hold that space for Christina as our teacher next week as well. So thank you all for being here, and thank you, Alex, for hosting for me.
Thank you, Ashley, and thank you, everyone, both here in the present and in the future. And yes, absolutely, as Ashley said, liberating death next week with Christina Lopez. You don't want to miss that. And you can find more information on our website. If you're not already a subscriber, consider becoming a subscriber. We have a 7-day free trial that you can find on the website. Tell all of your friends. That's weeklydharmagathering.com. And make sure to follow us on Instagram at Weekly Dharma and on Facebook at Weekly Dharma Gathering. So thank you all so much. Thank you, Ashley, and have a wonderful week. I should also say we do have one session of guided Tonglen practice that we've added to the calendar for Friday at 7 o'clock, just to help us hold the space during these last couple of weeks. So you'll find more information about that coming via email, and it's also on the social media channels. So thank you all very much, and see you next time.
Thank you.